Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This is the Legislative Conversations meeting, the annual meeting, which is run by the League of Women Voters of New Britain. We invite the area legislators. This is an unusual year. I guess with COVID, we're getting a little lighter. People are taking off places because we're missing a few people on vacations. Peter Terziak had been planning on coming, but was not feeling well this morning. I spoke with him, so hopefully he will be just up and about soon. I have heard from Manny Sanchez, who sends his regrets that he cannot make it. Manny was just appointed to the chair of the Labor Committee. He is also part of the Black and Puerto Rican Caucus, and they are holding a meeting this morning at 10 a.m. in New Haven. So that had to be a priority. It's a big, important organization, and yes, he needs to represent New Britain's needs at that meeting. So we are down to a number of people. Bobby Sanchez is out of state, and he did send me a very brief, well, it's not so brief, statement of his concerns. I'm going to just kind of say it and write it to give you an idea of what he was thinking of. That's a great reminder. If you have a phone in your pocket, if you turn it off, that would probably be a good idea. And you know what? I think I will do the same thing right now. Here we go. All right, done. It's that easy. All right, so this will be a meeting which has a structure of just a conversation, and as Rick is our only conversant here, Senator Rick Lopes, it will be fairly informal. We have questions from the State League of Women Voters, which I will ask him first, and then we have questions from the New Britain Area League, some of which I have compiled, and we have audience questions. What I ask is two things: that it be polite and that it be on topic, something which impacts the state legislature, the state of Connecticut. If it's a question about Iran's nuclear capabilities, it probably doesn't belong in this room today. So let's keep on topic with it. All right. So far as Bobby's comments for us, let me read through them very briefly first. Housing is his number one issue here that he wrote on his paper, with questions about what will be coming of the Mount Pleasant renovations, what will happen for housing for the people who live in Mount Pleasant already, how will that housing, the new housing that's going in to take its place, how will it be priced, how affordable will it be, what will be the impact? Taxes. How will the taxes go up with the city's, how much will they go up with the city's reevaluation? And can we at the state level, the legislators, continue to bring down the car tax, which is presently capped at 32 mils, to eventually eliminate it? That might be a balancing factor to towns as they go through evaluation and what we're all looking at with our tax bills incoming. School construction. Will the city come up with a 10 to 15-year plan on new construction that will include New Britain High School? The city has always run long-term plans on its building construction. Will the next one include the high school, which has so many problems with being such a large school and the only school in the city, and yet our lack of land and the cost of construction? It's a very complicated issue. Of course, the continuation of the ECS funding, the main bill which sends state funds to the cities for education, trying to equalize out the burden of educating youth. We need to increase special education funding under that bill, and we need to work to bring equity to the children of New Britain. Bobby has always been very involved in child care services, and of course that's part of his list: to increase preschool teacher salaries, increase access to affordable children's services, expand care for kids, etc. A long list of things to be done for child care. For many years, he served as chair of the Education Committee. At this point, I believe he will be deputy speaker, and someone else will take on that chairmanship. And then the last point he made was accountability. How are state and federal funding dollars being spent? Who is overseeing the cities and towns, and what are they doing with the pandemic federal funds? That was also a concern. So, having spoken of concerns, let me turn to our live guest. Look lively, Rick.
Sure.
And if you would tell us what your committees you're on, and what your priorities are, what your concerns are. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Just want to thank everyone that came out today, League of Women Voters. Rick Lopes, State Senator. It's the 6th District, which is all of New Britain, all of Berlin, small portion of Farmington. It is my second term in the Senate after 10 years in the House. And this year, it's a slight change for me. I used to be the chair of the Housing Committee, and after 2 years of beating my head telling everyone that we have a housing crisis coming and it's going to get worse, with not a lot of people listening, this year, all of a sudden, everyone goes, wow, housing might be a problem. We got to do something about it. So hopefully, the people who succeeded me will be able to make some strides on those issues. I'm the new chair of the Environment Committee, which is an interesting committee. It's wide-ranging. It covers a lot of different topics and aspects that you may or may not think is environment. Our number one priority this year is going to be waste disposal. We have a problem in this state. We don't have any place to put our garbage. And we've hit the point where we're shipping about 800 tons a year of our garbage to other states. So they throw it, the running joke of how environmental are you when you don't want to hurt the environment by throwing our garbage into a landfill or going to a trash to energy plant, but we're okay with putting it in trucks, shipping it to another state so that they can throw it into a landfill. I don't think that's an appropriate approach to our waste disposal. We're addressing it on multiple levels because it's complex. Obviously, the best way to address waste disposal is to reduce. We're trying to get after manufacturers to reduce the packaging, reduce all the excess materials we don't need that go into the waste stream. Organics seem to be an interesting thing that we're going to try to address this year, which is organics are your food scraps, things along those lines. We're going to try to take them out of the garbage stream. We're finding that 20 to 40% of our garbage is organics, and it's really hard to separate organics from other garbage when you try to do recycling. So if we can get that out of our waste stream, 20 to 40% of our garbage load, that would be a big help. And that stuff organics can go to certain organic landfills and be processed that way, and eventually, hopefully, composted into the point where they're not harmful for the environment. And then, of course, recycling is a big aspect. A lot of people don't know the largest and most advanced recycling facility in the world is in Berlin, on the New Britain-Berlin line. The tour of that facility is absolutely, it looks like the older folks, you remember the Jetsons. It looked like that with conveyor belts going 18,000 directions at high speed, and their ability to separate recyclables into distinct groups is absolutely astonishing to see. And if the world follows that trend, we'll see our recycling abilities improve. I also have a large role this year in the Transportation Committee. I've been on there for a long time now, vice chair there, and transportation's always a big issue in Connecticut, and we're going to be addressing a wide range of things there. I'm a big proponent for public transit. I want to see an increase in trains, buses. The getting rid of the bus fares, I think, during the pandemic was very successful. It got a lot of people to be able to, especially people of lesser means, to be able to make it to appointments, medical appointments, various shopping, everything in their life. It definitely, there was a cost to it, but compared to the benefit, it does seem like it was a good move at the time. I'm going to wrap up there and go into questions from.
All right. Well, let's go into the State League concerns to begin with. They've asked me to share with you a list of what their priorities are, and it only has 7 points. Election laws, and those get A and B. Of early voting implementation, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. No excuse absentee ballot law, which needs to be passed. 2 2 is open government and media broadband access.
Do you want to take them one at a time? Because I certainly
No, I
won't
just
remember
want-
if you list them all.
Let me read down them and then we'll come to the questions. Climate change mitigation, you've already talked a smidge about that with the trash things. Campaign finance reform, changes, gun safety, healthcare, and housing. And that's what you'll primarily be hearing from the state on. State League, let me talk about election law first. And as you know, early voting passed in the 2022 election, and now it is the job of the legislature to come up with the details, how to implement it. Should Connecticut fall in line with neighboring states and offer at least 1 week and 1 weekend of early voting? I believe that's a recommendation from the State League. Do you support a timeline that ensures availability of early voting for November 2023? If it incurs new costs to towns, will there be state funding to support that cost? And finally, we were just told that the Secretary of State has released a recommendation that for early voting, there be at least 2 voting places available. Is that enough for New Britain? Any reminders of any of that? Will be graciously forthcoming.
All right, good. Good question. I was supportive of early voting and previous, voting for it so that we reached this level. As I am a supporter of no excuse absentee voting. It's almost a pandemic in our country right now with the lack of voting percentage. I mean, not enough people vote. We know this. We look in New Britain, the disparity between the number of people who vote in a presidential year versus a non-presidential year is stark. The percentage is almost doubled. So, and even on a presidential year, what do we get to? 65%? That sound right? I mean, still maybe a little higher, but I mean, still not high enough. So, all these efforts are to increase the number of people who vote. And statewide, there is support for early voting. There is support for no excuse absentee voting. The new Secretary of State, I think she proposed 10 days.
2 weekends.
10 days, 2 weekends. So, I mean, it's not rocket science here. Other states do this, have done this for quite some time. I mean, the logical person would look at the states that have been doing this for a while, see what's successful, and try to mirror that rollout into our own state. And in terms of the details, I'm not on the committee that deliberates all that. I know there's a lot of proposals and a lot of different ways of doing it, whether it's 1 location, 2 locations. I don't know. I know our registrar was grumbling about it the other night, about, how am I going to pay for this and, an extra workload. I mean, we will work it out. If it looks like they need more funding, I mean, we'll have to supply more funding. But I've never seen the registrar's office being a huge financial impediment to the problem. And considering the problem is getting more people to vote, which is the bedrock of our democracy and society, I think if we need to find a little money, we will find a little money.
Thank you, that covered that well. The second part of their questioning on election law is the League supports measures that assure that absentee ballot privileges are available to all electors for any reason, for no reason. The League supports provisions to make it easier to vote by absentee ballot and to minimize the number of ballot rejections. Do you support an amendment to the state constitution to allow any qualified elector to cast an absentee ballot?
I think I covered that, but yes, I have in the past and will continue in the future.
Well, having told the state league, yes, I would ask some of their questions. I have
Sure.
done that. All right. The other thing that we would like to do is to thank you. The New Britain League has been pushing for a bill in order to clarify and simplify referendum questions. This is in response to the referendum questions which lump together numerous changes in our city governments and don't put that clearly on the ballot. It happened in New Britain, it's happened in at least a half dozen other towns that we've identified so far around the state of Connecticut. We came to the legislative delegation, the committee from the New Britain Area League, and asked that something be put into the election law about that. And at this point, it is a proposed bill. It is Senate Bill 862, and we hope to be following it. And we just want to say thank you for the action so far. We know this will be a long push, but we appreciate your support.
Yeah, not a problem. The bill was submitted by myself, Representatives Bobby Sanchez, Manny Sanchez, Peter Terziak, and our new representative, Gary Turco. In essence, we stated that on referendum questions, there should be one question per issue. And issues should not be lumped into one question for clarity. And then there's a secondary suggestion that when referendums are put together by a municipality, that someone at the Secretary of the State's office just gives it a read to see if it makes sense, is it clear by a legal standard, and if not, there shouldn't be any penalty. Just call the town back and say, hey, you need to clarify these questions and make them a little easier to understand for voters. It's a very common sense bill.
Thank you. We hope it goes far. We know that it's difficult to put anything through the legislature because you get in so much. But we hope this one would serve the people well, and we hope it will go through. All right. Last thing on citizens' election program. I'm aware that the whole New Britain delegation is strongly supportive of it. There has been some discussion about why the governor's races are not using that funding mechanism, and should there be changes to the governor's election portion. Do you have any thoughts on that?
The governor's races have not used it lately because the candidates for the governor's seat have chosen not to use the program. The program is optional. You don't have to take it. And we are in an unfortunate situation where people of wealth are able to come in, spend their own money, and they can spend more than they would get from the program. Mm-hmm. So they feel that it would be a competitive advantage to use their own money, which is more money than the program would get them. I believe Governor Malloy used the Citizens Election Program when he ran for a governor and won for governor 2 terms. So it does work when used, but there are situations where in the last 2 cycles for governor where 2 wealthy people were running against each other, and when one started spending more, the other started spending more, and it just escalated from there. Is that healthy? Probably not. I wish they would use the program and can confine themselves into using a certain amount of money. I know virtually all the state senate and state rep candidates in Connecticut use it, both Democrat and Republican. I think 80 to 90% of the candidates use the program. In fact, the few people who don't are the ones who are unopposed or are in districts that aren't really competitive. So in competitive districts, it's used quite often. So.
Okay, thank you. Electric bills. Electric bills are rising, it seems, uncontrollably. Is there a stronger role for the state government, perhaps through the DURA or PURA, to control these increases? Meanwhile, will there be new programs or increased funding for programs to help low and middle income ratepayers? Will there be any relief from the state of Connecticut for Connecticut businesses, especially the small businesses, as they try to deal with the ever-rising electric costs?
Okay. Well, I'll take a small tangent here. I mean, everyone brings up electric costs, but in my personal experience, it's my natural gas costs that are going up worse than my electric costs. But they are tied together, obviously. Natural gas rates have increased dramatically nationally. Connecticut, Eversource, they create a lot of electricity with natural gas. We have natural gas generators, so one is tied to the other. Increase in natural gas prices rolls into an increase in electrical prices. The state has far less ability to stop these rate increases than you would think. We have PURA, which is, geez, don't even have to spell the acronym, but it's right here in New Britain, their main office, and they oversee electrical rate increases. But the reality is, if the utility can show that the energy they're buying is increasing in price, then they can increase their rate, and we can't stop that. So there are multiple proposals on the table for having the state have a larger say in how these rate increases occur and our ability to slow them down or stop them. To the second point of the question, yes, just actually in special session, before session started, we did an increase to the amount of money available for energy assistance, and I imagine we're probably going to be doing more this session as well. There are a lot of people struggling. I was shocked. Our January gas bill was increased by about 30%, so that was a significant increase. Our electric bill, and I do say to people who are homeowners, we have solar at our house, and it has mitigated the electrical increase to the point where we didn't see an increase. So I advise people who have not looked into it, while it's still available, look into it. We did pass a bill, one of my personal bills of my favorite 2 years ago, allowing solar for apartment dwellers and multifamily housing. That program is still being kind of put together. I think it's almost there, but we think that's going to be available for renters to be able to put solar in, for the apartment in multifamily houses, which would really be a big boon to New Britain.
Thank you. I think it's time that I reach out to the audience people, because our audience has grown nicely, and if I have any questions from the audience, raise your hand. We need to speak into the microphone, no matter how loudly you speak, so that we can get it onto the Nutmeg television taping. So do I have any questions from the audience? Recorder asks.
Good morning, I'm Bill Shortell from the New Britain DTC, and I got to say thanks for being here, Rick, and thanks to the league for doing this. It's always great every year. I love it. I want to thank Bobby in absentia for bringing up the Mount Pleasant crisis, which is looming, and one way to address that is to have a cap on rent increases. The new Mount Pleasant won't fit everybody that's there now, and a lot of them, up to a third of them are going to have to go around and try to find some place to live. And we're at a 2% vacancy rate in this state, and that's including places that aren't affordable. So there's a strong proposal for capping rent increases at 2.5%, and I would ask Rick to talk about that.
Thank you.
Sure. You kind of covered two issues. The Mount Pleasant issue, you bring up Mount Pleasant, as most of you know, is subsidized housing based on people's income. They live there, but that particular housing project is, to be kind, dated, and not, the amount of repair needed to keep it moving has been problematic for years. I know the city, not so much, it's not a real state initiative, it's a city initiative it's a city and federal initiative to knock it down and build new public housing in that place. Bill didn't say it in the question, but he asked me last night. So, one of the issues that comes up when that happens is are we going to end up with the same number of units? And a lot of times, no, you end up with a ratio of just slightly less units than you used to have before, or the same. I think we got to fight for the same, because any housing vacancy rates might be 2% statewide, but it's lower in New Britain. There are no apartments available in New Britain, especially apartments that are affordable. I know we're building a lot of apartments, especially downtown. They are not affordable by New Britain standards. Saw the article yesterday, just the new building on Arch Street, which looks beautiful, but at I think it was $1,400 for an efficiency, $1,600 a month for a one-bedroom. They're nice, but you're paying for it. So people who live in New Britain, people who are struggling to find decent housing, are really in a tight spot. I use this example. I know a lot about housing. I've been in the housing industry for 20 years, and I was the housing chair for 2 years. I use this example a lot. 2-3 years ago, a two-bedroom apartment in New Britain, in most of the outskirts of New Britain, about $850 a month. And currently, those apartments right now are going at $1,200 a month, if not more. I know some people are asking for even more. I think they'll come down this year. There are signs that rent prices are coming down, but if they come down, they're going to come down to about $1,100, maybe $1,000 plus utilities. So that is an awful lot of money for the people at the income levels in New Britain, and it is a serious problem. The rent cap bill first blush does look like, oh boy, that's a tough bill. You know, there's going to be property owners and a lot of people very upset and fighting against that. The amount of organization and the people fighting for it is impressive. I know Bill went to an event and he said hundreds of people there working and organized trying to get this passed. So it will be a contentious bill this year. I do not know if it'll pass. I will be supportive of it. And a lot of people don't know. They think, rent control, that's a crazy thought. Connecticut used to have rent control.
Yes.
It was after World War II, we had rent control for many years. And what we found is both tenants and landlords didn't have, it worked. It wasn't a real impediment to landlords making a living. So, and especially we're at a time right now where rents are at an all-time high, saying that you can only increase 3%, 2% a year. It shouldn't affect people because rents are at a very high rate right now. Much higher than, I joke when I first came to New Britain, I paid $325 a month for a 2-bedroom on Broad Street, and utilities were very cheap. To think how much it's gone up $1,000 is a big change.
Yes, thank you. And I know that's an area that you know well because you are a landlord among other of your talents. Do we have some other questions from the audience?
Is it Nutmeg TV that this is being filmed on?
Nutmeg TV, yes.
Yeah, so there's going to be a really low audience watching this, which is probably good because I pay $525 a month from my apartment.
Good for you.
And everything's included. So,
Question?
say?
Do you have a question for?
Okay. I'm talking about what we were just talking about, okay?
Right.
Talking about garbage, we have to start looking at recycling a lot closer. And also the maintenance in the city, which is all related with recycling and stuff. It's really a bad job being turned in. So the bedrock is voting, people voting, but also workmanship is very important. And we're not seeing this in this town right now. That's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Sorry about the confusion there. Any comments on that, Mr. Lopes? Representative Lopes?
Was there a question or?
Not directly.
Okay, and if people could just say with their name, and where they're from, that would be great when they ask a question.
Okay.
Hi, I'm Marie Shan, you know me. But my question is, are they planning on working with companies like, or organizations like Roots, who does composting? They do have composting things, the composters, whatever they're called, that people can get, and for $10, whatever, compost. Is the state thinking about maybe working with organizations like that already have things going on?
In fact, the state already does work with Roots quite a bit. Department of Agriculture, my first meeting with them, my committee oversees them. First thing they brought up was Roots. It's in the district. I've worked with them for years. They do great work. There are a lot of different proposals on how we can do composting. And there's already quite a few pilot programs that are out in various towns, West Hartford, and I just talked to someone last night and they said they had it in their town too. Middletown's the other one, and not just the whole town, portions of the town. So there are these pilot programs out there to kind of feel out what works and what doesn't work. So we want to proceed slowly to not roll something out that's ineffective. We want to roll something out that is effective.
Thank you.
Hey, you choose not to take that as a question, but it's a question, okay?
No, then clarify.
Then you know.
Clarify. What was the question, sir?
I gave you the question when I was standing there just a minute ago.
Sir, could you put it into a question format? I'll give you the
You
microphone.
don't have to be exact pointing your dots on this.
Well, what I heard was something about a need for better city services.
Yep.
Where does that impact with the state legislature? Because we are looking for state questions at this point. Let's try that and then move on, okay?
Sure. I think you related to city services in terms of garbage collection. Recycling. We currently do the blue bin style of recycling. We are lucky. It's kind of an interesting point, like what you're bringing up here. There are a lot of myths and misconceptions about how recycling works. And I know I've argued with my wife about this a couple times too, about what can go into the blue bin and what can't go into the blue bin. And then you start hearing that if you throw one wrong thing into the blue bin, it can be tainted and it's not going to get recycled and be thrown in the garbage. We are one of the lucky communities that uses that facility on Christian Lane. And the owner there was very clear. He goes, no, we can handle it. Pizza boxes that people would say, yo, you don't put that in recycling. He goes, we can handle it. We can recycle that. The little black containers for your takeout food that it used to be a problem for a lot of recycling centers. He goes, we can handle that. We can separate those out. The technology they use is out of this world. Cameras taking 60 pictures a minute, air compressors firing wrong things off the conveyor belt as it's going at 30 miles an hour. Pretty amazing. So feel confident that in New Britain, our recycling is probably the best in the state. We're part of these communities that use that facility. So make sure you put your recycling in those blue bins. The more we do, the better off we are for the environment.
May I make a small suggestion? Many of our utilities are told to give out information, electric, gas, along with the bill. You get a little flyer. Might there be a requirement put in that the recycling centers for each of our municipalities or groups of municipalities give out information more frequently as to what can be recycled? Because you're absolutely right, there's a lot of confusion.
There is, and what we find is, unfortunately, in the larger cities, even more than New Britain, your Hartford, New Haven, and Bridgeport's, they create the most garbage. Well, obviously, they have the most people, but they have the lowest recycling rates in the state. Where there's density, obviously, multifamily housing, it is harder to recycle properly. And so we wanted to have a component of recycling and waste management this year that will involve education, going out into the communities and educating people what you can recycle, what you can't recycle, and how important it is to recycle.
Thank you. They have another question from the audience, and if not, you'll get one from me.
I'll do one. In the last session of the legislature, there was some movement to push wealthier towns to change their zoning practices to enable less expensive housing. Do you see this push for more affordable housing moving forward in this session?
Yes, there are, again, proposals. What ends up happening is some of our wealthier towns, not the current administrations or even recent administrations, but really over the last 50 to 100 years, if not longer, have instituted policies using zoning to make sure, for lack of a better word, only wealthy people live there. And some of them will argue up front, it's like, we moved here, so we don't have to be around poor people. And there's the racial component to that too, of, when they say poor people, what do they mean? And as a state, we have passed bills in previous years, quite some time, that all towns should have at least 10% of their housing be affordable housing. And most towns meet that threshold. Obviously, the cities far exceed it. But there are a couple of towns that have 0, 2%, 3%. And we've been trying to implement over the last couple of years different pieces of legislation to encourage them to build more affordable housing, especially on that like Fairfield County corridor, where the I-95 corridor, as we call it, has the Metro North Railway. They're saying if you're going to build affordable housing, build it on transit-oriented development. Build it near the train stations. Build it where people might want to live, use the train to commute to cities to work. And it's been a struggle, to say the least. There are new proposals this year to encourage that even more. Well, go ahead, should have followed.
Just an add-in to that program.
When they say 10%, is senior housing part of that?
Yes, the 10%, and it's a really good question because people think affordable housing is just housing that's inexpensive. When we say affordable housing by state definition, it is deed certified affordable housing. That means in the housing deed, that housing must be no more than 30% of the income of the person that lives there. So I do believe senior housing can count as that if it hits that criteria.
But that,
That, a lot of towns are getting away with that 10% by offering senior housing, and that doesn't really address the issue.
I'm not quite sure. I mean, if it does fall into the category of subsidized housing and no more than 30% of the person's income used to pay rent, it does fall into the category of affordable housing. One of the greatest groups of need in housing, and this comes up in Berlin and some of the suburban towns, even it happens here in New Britain, even more, is people who have grown in that town, live in that town, are a senior on a fixed income, can no longer afford to live in their house, need that type of senior housing, which is income-based, and that very much, in my eyes, counts as affordable housing and should.
Okay, thank you.
go ahead.
Okay, so,
May I give you the microphone, please?
oh, absolutely. I'll be loud enough. Good morning, everyone in Los. I have an issue with, so is it okay for anyone that is a senior citizen living in an apartment and all of a sudden gets a 300% hike on their rent, and then has to wait for the process of being able to be put on a list to get into senior housing? What do they do in the meantime? Because this has happened to my stepdad. And he's lived in this apartment for quite a while here in downtown New Britain, which is very unfair. I'm a person that is sick who's living on Social Security. And what else, another thing, in addition to that, my niece living in an apartment has gotten her rent in the past year raised 3 times, and different owners, and then they're out of state.
Yes.
Like, what could we do as a community? Educate us and let us know what we could do as a community to rally. What do we need to do, Rick? What do we need to do? Because it's getting to be that I'm constantly hearing people, I can't buy food because I gotta make sure I have a roof over my head. This is what I'm hearing from families, friends, people, you know, it's just becoming, and when they say poor people, we're the poor people that lived in this town for years. Why should we have to move? Because we want to better our town. Who doesn't? But the middle class is becoming the poor class as well.
Well, thank you. And this is what we've been working on the last 3 to 4 years, talking about the beginning and now fully fledged housing crisis that we're in. That was definitely made worse by the pandemic, but it was happening anyway, and now the pandemic's ending, it's still continuing worse. So last year we passed a bill mandating rent commissions in towns. Your rent commission is where the citizens can go if you have an outrageous rent increase. And the city of New Britain kind of has a rent commission. Contact the city, they have someone who's in charge of that. And there should be a committee, and this is where we need to organize, because New Britain kind of does it. They act more as a mediator, the city, between the landlord and tenant. But in reality, there's a more official role in state statute where the city can create a commission that will hear complaints from tenants saying, I have lived here for 10 years. I've been paying $800 a month for 10 years. I've always paid, I've been a good tenant, and then someone just bought my house, and this is such a common problem in New Britain. This is the core of the crisis, is that a new person bought my building, and now they're saying my rent's $1,400 a month. I can't handle it. And they should be able to go, and that rent commission has the legal authority to tell the landlord, no, that increase is too big, you can't do it. Especially if someone's a senior. There are actually additional laws, if you're senior and disabled, where landlords can't really evict you if you've been paying your rent on time without problems, because you can evict someone for end of lease. Like, you're my tenant, lease is over, I can say you can leave. I don't need an excuse. Lease is over, you need to leave. But if you're a senior or you're disabled and you've been paying, you can say, no, you can't evict me for that. And the court will back you up on that. But I can increase your rent. And that's where the rent commission comes in, say if it is deemed an unreasonable increase, you can legally have protection on stopping that from happening. And it needs to be used more often because it's happening nonstop. As Ann alluded to, I'm a landlord, I owned a 6-family house, I sold it in May. And it's breaking my heart that every single one of my tenants, many who had been there 10 years, have all been forced out since May. I think there's one left in that building. And it's killing me.
My son-in-law did the same thing in May and regretted.
Yeah, so it's awful. So,
Thank you.
take Nate in the back.
Go across the room for us.
Oh, Bill.
Been in the White House.
I forgot to mention the 2% cap to fix it.
Oh.
Whatever. I'll get back to
Mike.
it. I'll get back to it. Oh, and before you start, sorry, and I know you came in late, but talk to Bill. There is also a movement this year for a 2% cap. I didn't realize you had missed it coming in late. All right, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay.
Sorry? Well, no, the proposal's 2.5. Who knows where it's gonna be?
Well, my name is Bishop Smith. I lived in my street where I live at on Kensington Avenue. I lived in that same building for 14 years. We done had 3 buyers since then. My rent was $600, and my rent just went up to $1,000, and my rent just went up to $1,400 with new buyers. Now, I called, now this is the regular owner, I mean, she was good, $600 for 2-bedroom, but she just sold it to them 8 months, and now they just sold it again in the last 4 months, and as soon as these landlords from New York came in, they went up to $1,400, okay? I called the city, when you was talking about the city commissioner, I talked to them and told them about the situation, and they told me for where I live at on Kensington Avenue, that's reasonable for my rent. $1,200 is reasonable for my rent. At that point, when it went up to $1,000. I mean, if this is the city of New Britain, why is the city of New Britain not working with me instead of going for these landlords who they don't even know and saying, okay, well, that's reasonable for the rent for where I live at in my area, because I live on Kensington Avenue. I mean, $1,200, that's reasonable. And this is from the city of New Britain. And I even talked to the courts. Same thing, you know, same thing. So, I mean, what do I do at this point where you're telling me that I can go to our mayor's office, our city commissioner office, and nobody's even doing nothing?
Let's hand it over to Senator
Yeah.
Lewis.
Well, the same as what we just spoke to here. The city is supposed to be implementing a rent commission. I don't believe they really are. I talked to people who are on the website who are listed as members of that commission, and they say they haven't met in years. So they've actually done, what they do is they have a staff person for the city, this is my understanding, who takes that role themselves and they act more as a mediator to try to work something out. But that is not following the letter of the law. And I think, as you mentioned, how can we organize? This is how you organize. Go to the city council meetings and say, why are we not, with this housing crisis in this city, people being forced out of their apartments, why are we not running a full rent commission that goes over and helps with people being displaced nonstop out of their apartments? It's something we need to do.
Thank you. As serious as rental questions are, let's see if we can switch our topic over, because I think we've heard all the answers we can hear from the state level right now. Do we have healthcare, gun control, immigration? Peggy, I'm coming towards you.
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to know about pandemic federal funds. Where are we going with that? What are they doing? I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I just wanted to know what's happening with pandemic federal funds and what's being done about it. And we also talked about free transportation. They're doing that all across the land. I know in Washington, D.C., they set up free transportation, not for buses, not for the metro, but only for buses. And are we going to continue with free transportation, or is that going to be changed? It's just 2 questions, the pandemic funds and transportation. Thank you.
Pandemic funds are ending, and it's going to create hardships in certain industries that have relied on pandemic funds. I mean, one-time income is always a danger. When you get a lump sum, and a lot of times we'll say, we tried to spend a lot of it on paying down debt, doing projects, things that happen once. But in some situations, our Board of Ed in New Britain being one of them, they used that pandemic money to hire an awful lot of people. Well, when the funds disappear, you have all these people working, and how are you going to pay for them? It creates, the Board of Ed is facing a serious problem that way. There are other industries that have done the same thing out of necessity. I mean, they understood it was a risk, but sometimes you don't have a choice. Pandemic money is running out. We just met with the Family Resource Center. They have a year left on one of their grants that really expanded services into the city. And they're trying to figure out a year from now when it's gone, what are they going to do? In terms of transportation, I think we did pass something that the bus fares will come back slowly, little by little over this next year. There are some really weird provisions. We get a lot of money from the federal government, and when we do, they put caveats on that money saying, to get this money, you have to do this. And we're still investigating, but one of it was we have to charge for bus fare and to get, but my take on that is, well, do we need to go back to the full bus fare, or can we keep it at a nickel or a dime and charge something, but still give people a break on using public transit?
Thank you. Microphone is available for someone.
Thank you, Ann. Mary Ridings Ward with the League of Women Voters. And Senator Lopes, thank you so much for being here and for all of your work in the past. And as you embark upon the Environment Committee, I have a couple questions that relate to the environment. The first one is, there is a bill to uncouple the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and I'd like to know your thoughts on that. And the second question is about the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment, which is also an HJ that will be coming through. And I just want to read the first statement of the Connecticut Environmental Rights Amendment. Each person of the state of Connecticut shall have an individual right to clean and healthy air, water, soil, and environment, a stable climate, and self-sustaining ecosystems for the benefit of public health, safety, and the general welfare. So if you could comment on both of those questions.
I've not seen that yet come through the committee, so I assume it's a proposal some legislator has raised that will be coming to my committee probably in the next week or so. We have a lot of those. We had one in housing last couple of years called Right to Housing, that every resident has the right to a certain amount of housing things. They're good. They're aspirational bills, as we like to say. They don't do much other than state that the state is invested in its residents and want to do this. It doesn't put a lot of meat to the bone or money to the project, but we'll see when that comes to us. And what was the first question again? Sorry. Uncoupling. That did come to us. We talked about it yesterday. No one's really aware of what it means or what people are trying to get at. We will have a public hearing on it where people will state their case. And if you know, we coupled them about a decade ago. I gotta be more specific on that. There really was no agency specifically assigned to energy. It kind of was, DEP is what we call it, Department of Environmental Protection. And then about 10 years ago, we said, we really have to start paying attention to energy. But rates are going up, and we have to know what's going on. So they made it DEEP, Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and it's been like that for 10 years. Uncoupling it, I imagine, would be making energy into its own agency. We got to hear proposals and see if the administration would have to back that, the governor would have to back that, because they're the ones that would have to implement it, and I've not heard from them on that yet.
Thank you. I think I would like to ask you one for a moment here. Healthcare in Connecticut seems to be controlled by 3 or 4 major corporate healthcare entities, leaving some areas of the state unserved or underserved. With the growth of mega practice groups, patients are finding it increasingly difficult to find a primary care physician who can see them on a timely basis if they're sick or and that appointments are run on a 15-minute timed basis, kind of like a production line. What should the role of the state be to intervene on behalf of Connecticut's residents in need of better health care?
Well, it's slightly off base here, but I just saw a cartoon the other day of the woman standing next to the grave explaining to her friend that, by the time we got the approval, filled out the forms, got the proper referrals, and worked through all the paperwork, well, it was too late, and Bob's gone. You're right. We are facing the homogenization of all our healthcare systems. We joke in a dark manner that, in a couple of years, we're going to have one or two, maybe two healthcare companies in the state, and they're going to run everything. And once they do that, they'll do whatever they want. They're pretty close to that now. There's two big ones and two or three small ones now, and the thought is that smaller ones are just going to continuously be bought out. We saw that as Hartford Healthcare bought out New Britain General. We don't have local control of our hospital anymore, or really any input of what's going on there. It's a problem. As you know, my entire career, I've been a proponent of universal health care. I think it's the only way we can go. We're one of the only industrialized modern countries in the world that don't have some form of that, some form of basic health care that everyone can receive health care. Do I think it's going to happen anytime soon? No. Do I think we still got to keep working for it? Yes. It is crucial. It is not okay that to have proper health care, you have to have money. And even then doesn't help you so much sometimes either. And Connecticut's, we're ahead of the curve. You go to other states and you talk to some of our retiree friends who go down to Florida, and they don't have proper health care within an hour or two of their house sometimes. And some of them joke they come up here for the summer after they retire just so they can go see doctors, because it's either not good down there or everything's far away from your house. So yeah, health care is important, and I don't think this country does a very good job on it.
Universal health care is something that resonates well personally with me. Is that a state issue, or does it have to be on the Fed? What would be the state part of that?
We've tried to run universal health care. We were on the verge of passing it statewide quite some time ago, over 10 years ago, but that's when Obamacare went into place. And we pulled back thinking, well, this wasn't what we wanted, but it was in the direction we wanted. And now we're seeing, well, we need to go further. Absolutely.
All right, that leads me to one other area, which is how do you feel about opening up Husky so that it applies to everyone, documented, undocumented, everyone who lives in Connecticut?
That is a bill currently up in the legislature. I've seen it. I'm already a supporter. No problem with it. We can't just give health care to some people. It's the most ridiculous thing in the world. If you're in our state, you're working, you're being a member, whether you're working at home, whether you're working at a job, and you're a member of our state, we don't want you sick. You need health care. It is absolutely a right and privilege, and I know over there's been waiting.
Thank you. Okay. Amy, microphone. And then,
I wanted to draw attention to Vanessa, who's here to speak on that.
Oh, you're doing that to that?
Really, that was my follow-up question.
Yeah, that was my follow-up question. Good morning, everyone. My name is Vanessa. I met with you, Rick Lopes, with Connecticut Students for a Dream. Thank you for supporting the Husky for All. I have a question. Is there any updates? Or legislative, have you heard anything from up there?
I hate to give you the short answer, no. For those of you know that we're in the second busiest section of session. These first 2 or 3 weeks, when all the bills, 3,000 bills have been proposed, and they're getting dumped in every committee, and every committee is just trying to sort their way through it. So it is really 5 to 7 meetings a day, some at the same time, all going on, trying to get us organized. In a couple of weeks, things will slow down. They'll hit the point where we're heading towards public hearings, and then we'll have a better grasp of where we're going. But right now, no update.
okay, thank you. Do we have any other folks who would like to speak up about things? Come back here.
You having any fun yet?
Yeah, that's fine.
You have to get it closer.
I have a question about multi-unit apartments. Are they required by the state to have off-street parking?
Good question.
I've got an issue with the old Aquinas School where they're gonna put 50 units there with no parking, so everyone would be lining the streets.
That's a good, might want to repeat it for everybody.
Can you ask your question once more real close?
Talking about Aquinas property that they're gonna put in, well, they were talking about putting in multi-unit apartments there, 50 of them with no off-street parking. Is there a requirement by the state that they have to have off-street parking?
The question was on off-street parking and state requirements for it relevant to the Aquinas property.
The short answer is, I don't know for certain. I will go on my experience of what I've seen. And I don't think it's state, I think it's your local municipality that has authority over this. And I believe it's an ordinance, and don't correct me if I'm wrong, that you should have 2 spots per unit. But I do know, if you're grandfathered in, I've seen 6 families with 0 parking, and you can sell it, and it stays that way. I mean, it's already been built. With new construction, there should be, the ordinance should kick in where they should have parking, unless, of course, there has been an exemption, which the developers and builders can go for an exemption on any aspect of those ordinance rules. I don't know the project well enough to know. This would be a question for the city. Go to the city council, talk to your alderman, and ask them, like, what exactly are the parking requirements of Aquinas? I'm sure they're following what they have to, but did they get an exception? Because 50 units would be 100 spots. 100 spots is a lot of spots. And I don't think knowing that footprint, I don't think it's big enough, but so they probably got an exception somewhere.
Is there any way to stop that then?
City, I mean, that's a city decision. You go to the city council, talk to the mayor, call the mayor's office, talk to the aide, express your displeasure, ask what the parking plan is for that building, talk to your alderman and say, hey, I have a problem with this, that they're gonna be parking all over the streets, and get activated.
Rick, what would be the reasons for exemptions?
If you don't have enough room.
No, that they will have an exemption that it wouldn't matter about the parking.
I can't hear everyone else, you're echoing really bad.
What would be the reason for them to get an exemption that they won't require parking?
So she's asking what would be reasons for an exemption so you don't have the adequate parking? Well, I think, and I'm guessing here, this is not my project or something I'm involved in, but my guess here is you don't have the room. You know, we have this building, say it existed Court Street, they had that building there, they renovated it. The city wanted that building renovated. There's no parking for that building, or there's a couple spots in the lot next door, but not enough for that entire building. But if you want the building renovated, you have to give me an exemption that I don't meet the parking requirements.
Right, and then when the snowstorms come and we need to move all these cars because then we get ticketed, then where are they gonna move into, like, Roosevelt? Like.
And that's the counter argument of why you don't give an exemption, but.
So that's why we need to go and do something about
that.
it. Yes.
I mean, these things are debated in the city council meetings and the planning meetings, and they're talked about, and it's hard to be involved in all these things, but it's stuff you have to take into consideration when you want development and renovation in your city. I mean, we're looking at these enormous developments downtown New Britain. Obviously, there's not going to be a lot of parking, but these developments also are developed for people who are going to be using public transit and not cars. You know, all cities don't have enough parking. Anytime you get dense areas, you're not going to have enough parking. So, there's some.
All right, I think that we're beginning to reach down into city issues. And as we only have one legislator here, we're not going to go until noon because it's a lot to ask one person. He's been speaking to us very informatively for the last hour already. So let me do a quick wrap up of what we've done. We've really covered quite a lot of ground here. Housing, I would say, is the most frustrating issue that we have talked about today, with rental housing being terribly inadequate. Not just in New Britain, but everywhere throughout Connecticut. It needs to be addressed. We talked about waste disposal, we talked about composting and other environmental issues coming off that area. We talked about early voting as it comes into Connecticut and what will it look like, and the fact that we want to have absentee ballot. We, the League, has endorsed the position that there should be absentee ballot, no excuse need be given. We talked about the possibility of raising Bill SB 862, which will keep ballot questions clarified to one issue per question. We talked about the electric rates rising, and likewise the CNG rates, and what the state impact could be on that to help. Talked about some of the solutions that the state has already put into place, but obviously a great deal more is needed for most of us to get through the winters and then the summer air conditioning season. We talked about zoning, about trying, as a New Britain person, I'll say, trying to get the other towns to take their fair share of affordable housing and stop needing 4 acres to live on per person. We talked about the fact that there are rent commissions, and New Britain City Rent Commission perhaps needs a bit of boosting so that it will become a tool that people can use to fight back to preserve fair rental costs. We talked about health care. It's very difficult in Connecticut, it's very difficult countrywide because healthcare is becoming a corporate entity and we're getting squeezed out of services. There's a big clash between those two forms of service provision. And we talked about parking, which is a problem in New Britain where we have so many people. I'll add that on parking with the new apartments downtown, I believe some of them have rights to use the garages, and that will cause a crunch on the rest of us who go there to park during meetings for shopping, etc. I expect, personal opinion, the rates in the garages are going to climb as parking becomes more difficult in the city. We'll see. That's not a very positive note to end on. So let's say we have 25 people here at least, if not 30, who came out on a Saturday morning because they care, because they want to know more and they want to be involved. The League of Women Voters encourages you to go to your city meetings, to speak up. The Common Council meets Wednesdays, second week of the month, I believe. You can check that on the city website. The Board of Education meetings are open to the public. The hearings of various committees are. And if you want to impact the state legislature, you can use the State of Connecticut portal, which you'll find online. Can you give us an email address? I don't want to botch this. Or a web address. It's CGA dot.
It's a little bit hard, but RICK dot RICK.LOPES@CGA.CT.gov. Nice easy one.
And if you want to talk to anyone other than the esteemed Mr. Lopes, you can just use the CGA.CT.gov.
Our name's spelled with a dot.
And that will take you there. Yes.
I'm Jeff Bray. I'm president of the New Britain Institute. And this thing seems to go on and on.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
I just want to say the library has made an application to the state of Connecticut for community improvement grant, and that Senator Lopes supported the application. Not only did he personally support it, but he got all our other state representatives to sign in support. So thank you to Rick and Ainsley.
Mr. Bray, with the New Britain Institute, as mentioned, there is a program called Community Investment Grants. We created it last year. It allows community agencies to apply for grant funding from the state for projects, the library being one. We've been successful getting the library little bits of money year after year, the last couple of years, but they did do an application for more funding. The delegation members and I, signed on to the letter of support, and we are working to try to get them and a couple of other New Britain groups money through this grant program.
Great. Let me add, the League of Women Voters thanks the library for providing the community room here at the New Britain Public Library for free for community use.
Yay.
Well, have a very good Saturday. Stay involved. Thank you for coming.